Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to be showing you step by step how I made the chainsword for my model. I apologize for my voice, I'm a little bit sick at the moment, but I was really excited to make this video, so I thought let's just do it. So the first thing I did when I wanted to make this was I formed a plan. I found some reference material on the internet. The top chainsword in this picture is actually one I made a few years ago, and that kind of inspired me to make a better one this time. So that's where I always begin. Next, I drew out a plan and got an idea in my head of how I wanted to build it and what sort of layers and things I'd have to do. Although this isn't a very detailed diagram, for me it gives me a little rough idea of where I can go with the sword. So the most important part of the sword to me would be the blades. These can be scratch built, but it would have taken a long time. Not an impossible feat, but something we don't need to do if we have the parts. So I got some Kamm aftermarket chainsaws and chopped them up and then put them together, and that's what you can see here. I then drew out the body for the sword on some graph paper, so I had straight lines and had a rough idea of where I wanted to go with it. I traced that design onto some graphed masking tape, and then I put that onto some styrene sheet, and then I cut round that to get the initial template of the body. Using that first template, I made a few more templates, so I had a master and others I could work on. I decided I wanted to cut out the shape that I'd drawn on the original design, and I did that by using tape to mask off where I'd drawn. I then used a 0.125 chisel to help me cut round that, and then I finished it off with my design knife just to get the edges nice and clean. Once I cut out the template on the styrene, I super glued that to another piece of pla plate, cut round that, and then I had a mirror image of the body. In my head, I wanted it to be a little bit more complex than just a few pieces of pla plate stuck together, so I took the templates I made some more intricate designs of varying thicknesses on pla plate, and that's what you can see here. When I make an interesting shape, such as the ones to the right and left, far left and right, I still do the same thing. I super glue it to another piece of pla plate and I cut round it to get the shape. When I need to chamfer the edge of a thick pla plate to make it blend in better, what I do is I take a Sharpie and I go along the edges, and then what you can see in this picture is where I've sanded back the edges. So where it's white is actually an angle and the black is now on top, so that gives me a good idea of what I'm working with, because sometimes with white pla plate it's difficult to see what angles that you're getting. Here we have a quick picture of all the pieces of pla plate together, just showing you what the body's going to look like later on. Next up, I used Aves epoxy sculpt to fill in the back of the sword, just to give it a little bit more durability, but also a flat surface to work on at the back. Sanding this down took a while, and it's all about patience, and the reason I've left the sanded dust in the background in this picture is because I want you guys to be aware that it can be quite harmful. That's not the reason I sound like this, but make sure you wear some goggles or a mask or something, or if you've got pets, make sure they're not around. And the sanding is the biggest part of scratch building. We're always sanding things. Something I do when I ever make something from scratch or add to a model, I always use quite a variety of different putties to make sure everything's nice and clean, so when I prime, I don't need to prime again. It's prime once and then I'm happy. So here is perfect plastic putty I've put over the back where the epoxy and the pla plate are bonded. I also use Tamiya basic putty on finer scratches, so what I've done there is go across the finer edges with the Tamiya putty. Next up, I started working on the handle, and I took an existing handle from another sword that I had, chopped it down a bit, tweaked it a little bit, and then I started thinking, how am I going to attach this to the base of the sword? So I made sure it was completely straight. That's the most important part of this before going forward. Once I'd got the frame, I decided what I'll do now is I'll fill it with epoxy putty, let that cure. And the reason this is masking tape over it is because when you're working with epoxy putty, you can get your fingertips on different areas, and sometimes you don't realize you're doing it. And then when you come to prime, you've got a fingerprint on the model. So I always try and just protect the work I've already done. And then that's what it looks like when it's been sanded back. To connect it to the base, I used brass pins initially, and then later on you'll see how I attach it and make it more secure. The engine for the sword was made from a grenade launcher from Kamm. I just chopped it up, changed it a lot, epoxied the bottom, added some pla plate, some cogs that I got from some RC cars, epoxied those, tweaked those again, chopped them up, re-scribed some lines, and that's kind of where we are there with that picture. I wanted the sword to have a fuel source embedded into it, so I decided to take a propellant tank and add it to the back, but I also wanted it to look like it was embedded. So to do that, you take some plat plate. This is a stencil and a scribing tool I have. I would just circle one of the templates till I got the circle, refine it with some sandpaper and a pencil, and then that's what it kind of looks like when you put the plat plate on. From there, you can chop it up, sand it down, and it makes it look as if something is embedded into something else. Following the same techniques, I made a little bit more detail to add to the top, and that's kind of how it turned out in the end. Moving from there, I wanted to scribe and chisel out some of the epoxy work I'd done and add something in. So this is a 3mm chisel from Madworks and some scribing tape. I measured it out, put it in there, chiseled it out patiently, and then I added a little koto vent. And as you can see next to it, the chamfered edges are done using the Sharpie method. And the reason there's black lines is because the Sharpie bleeds in between the plat plate. It's not going to show up after primer, and it definitely isn't going to be a line because those edges are putted and clean. So the little square details in the sword are actually an aftermarket part I found. Just sanded them down, chopped them up, and then added them to the sides. I also did some more work with more details and scribing, but I won't bore you with that. To attach the handle to the base of the sword, I added a thicker copper rod in the bottom, or brass rod, sorry, and then I used Gorilla epoxy glue. Now this stuff, if you want something to be attached, this will keep it attached for the rest of its life. There's no way of getting this back apart without breaking something. So put that together, leave it 24 hours, bish bash bosh, attached. And this is the final result of all the hard work. So there is some details and scribing and things that won't really show up until it's primed. And when it's painted, it will really sort of come into itself. Thank you for sticking with the video for this long if you have. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I plan to, after I finish this project, I plan to make little miniature 3 to 4 minute videos on little basic scratch building tips from things I've learned. I'm definitely no expert. There are probably 25 better ways of making what I've just made, but this is a learning process and we do things because we enjoy it, and I really enjoyed making this sword. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned because the next thing we are going to be doing is I'm going to be making a base for this project, and then after that we'll be priming and going from there. So thank you as ever, hope to catch you guys in the next video.